bum bum ba-dum bum ba-dum bum bum ba-dum bum bum ba-da-dum bum ba-dum bum ba-dum bum bum ba-dum bum bum.
Welcome to Everyday Musicality, the podcast in which we discuss all things related to Gordon's music learning theory and how it can help unlock the inner musician that lives inside of all of us. I'm your host, Heather Shouldice, music educator and faculty member for the Gordon Institute for Music Learning. In this episode, I share some ideas for providing students with informal music guidance experiences. Hello and welcome to the Everyday Musicality podcast. We've got a very important date coming up next Tuesday, November 3rd. It is Election Day here in the U.S., and this very well could be the most important election of our lifetimes. So please, in addition to making sure you get your own ballot in, please encourage everyone you know to vote. If you need more information, you can go to iwillvote.com to find out where to drop off your ballot, find out if you're registered, and get all kinds of important information on voting in your state. Also, remember that some states even allow you to register to vote on Election Day with proof of residency. This and more information is available again on iwillvote.com. So make a plan, not only for your vote, but for helping your friends and family vote as well. Next Tuesday, November 3rd is also important because it is the deadline to enter our current giveaway from sponsor GIA Publications. Remember, we're giving away a copy of Music Play and the brand new Music Play 2, and you can enter to win either or both. If you want to enter to win a copy of Music Play, simply post a photo, image, or graphic on social media with the text, "I am a music teacher because," or "Music is important because." Just be sure to add the hashtags Everyday Musicality Podcast and GIA Publications, and either set the post privacy to public so I can see it when I search for the hashtags, or tag the Everyday Musicality Podcast page, or email me a screenshot of your post. If you want to enter to win a copy of Music Play 2 hot off the presses, you can head on over to your podcast app of choice, rate and review the show, and email a screen cap of your review to everydaymusicality@gmail.com, or post the screen cap to the Everyday Musicality podcast page on Facebook. I'll be announcing the winners of both giveaways in the next episode, so be sure to enter by November 3rd if you'd like me to announce your name in that episode on November 10th. Also, in that next episode, we'll be having our very first podcast guest. To wrap up this little series on preparatory audiation and informal guidance, I will be having a conversation with an expert on these topics, one of the co-authors of both Music Play and Music Play 2. So be sure to tune in next time for that special guest conversation. In today's episode, I'll be talking about some practical ideas for providing informal guidance in school music classes. Back in episode 13, I talked about how informal music guidance is important readiness for formal music instruction, because informal music guidance immerses students in musical sounds and provides the opportunity to develop a sense of syntax and context in music. Also, remember that in informal guidance, the teacher isn't expecting students to demonstrate a particular musical response or give a correct answer. This is because the goal of informal music guidance is simply to provide a rich musical environment in which students can explore and experiment with musical sounds, and the teacher can help guide them through music babble, which I talked about in the last episode. Back in episode 3 on sequential music learning, I summarized Gordon's theory that we learn music through a process that parallels that in which we learn our native language. Just as we begin learning our native language by hearing lots of language and beginning to play with the language sounds we hear, children need informal opportunities to develop their musical listening vocabulary and speaking vocabulary, their sounds that they've been exposed to in music, and then playing with imitating those sounds. During this time, students must be allowed to explore musical sounds and movement, to babble with music and movement, before they're expected to sing and chant and move to music with accuracy. Before we get into some practical ideas for doing this, I wanted to mention that it is important to provide students with opportunities to engage with music that is sung or chanted without words. Most children come to elementary school with lots of familiarity with language, but much less familiarity with music. Therefore, when presented with a song or chant that has lyrics, students will be much more likely to focus their attention on the text rather than the musical sounds themselves. When hearing or performing music without lyrics, students are free to focus on the pitches, rhythms, and expressive qualities of the music itself without the distraction of language. Using songs without words also encourages children to engage their singing voice rather than their speaking voice. Children are used to speaking words, which is why some students will naturally try to imitate a song that has lyrics in a speaking voice. However, they do not typically use their speaking voice to make sounds such as bum-ba-dum, ya-da-da, or lu-lu-lu. For this reason, performing songs on these kinds of neutral syllables can help students explore and learn to use their singing voices. There's nothing wrong with occasionally using songs and chants with lyrics. In fact, this can be an effective way to regain students' attention if they're losing focus. Just be sure to provide students with many more opportunities to hear and perform songs and chants without lyrics. Now, let's look at some ways of providing informal guidance experiences that can help develop students' musical listening vocabularies. You may be thinking, wait, my students haven't been exposed to music for years. Why do I need to worry about their musical listening vocabularies? While it is true that all children have probably heard music before they reach your school music program, most come with a limited background of musical experiences. Relatively few children, at least in the United States, grow up in home environments that include live music making on a regular basis. Many adults don't feel comfortable making music and don't consider themselves to be musical, so they may avoid singing for and with their children. If they do sing at all, it may be a limited repertoire of songs, such as a lullaby at bedtime or a few traditional children's nursery rhymes. Similarly, the recorded music heard by many children in their daily lives is often limited in terms of tonality, meter, timbre, and genre or style. Therefore, before we expect students to develop musical skills, it is important to provide them with opportunities to build a rich musical listening vocabulary. The fundamental way in which we can do this is to perform songs and chants for students in a wide variety of tonalities, meters, and styles. It's fine to include recorded music, but interaction with a live musical model is crucial to guiding students' musical development. Listening to a live model, however, is not enough. We must find ways to keep students actively engaged as they develop their listening vocabulary. In my experience, movement is one of the most effective tools for doing this because it makes use of children's energy and their need to move, while also providing a vehicle for experiencing musical concepts. Movement also does not require extensive verbal explanation. One of the most effective ways of teaching movement is through modeling that movement. In addition, imaginative play can open up endless possibilities for engaging students in listening and moving. One important way we can get students moving while building their listening vocabularies is to move with flow, or continuous fluid movement. Moving our bodies in a smooth, continuous, uninterrupted way helps students navigate through space and time. So it's an important readiness to prepare students for beat movement and feeling meter. Providing students with lots of opportunities to move with flow as they listen will get them feeling the space between the beats, which in turn will help them develop a more consistent sense of tempo and meter. Therefore, whenever possible, model moving with continuous flow when singing and chanting for your students, and plan activities that will get students moving with flow in playful ways. And remember that during informal guidance, students should not be forced to move in particular ways. The teacher should model the appropriate flow movement and encourage students to move similarly, but not demand it or expect correct movement. Just continue to provide those experiences with continuous fluid movement, and students will engage as they become more comfortable and developmentally ready. In addition to simply modeling continuous fluid movement and inviting students to copy your moving while you sing or chant, you can also incorporate lots of more playful ways of encouraging students to move with flow as they listen. One great technique is to think of some kind of imagery that would inspire that continuous fluid movement and ask students to imagine that they're moving in that way. This could include pretending to stir a giant pot of soup or a big bowl of cookie dough. After adding each imaginary ingredient, invite students to stir it in smoothly while you sing the song. Another idea is to pretend to paint the floor, walls, and ceiling with a different color during each repetition of a song. You could also have students pretend to swim, to float like a bubble or a snowflake, or to move like seaweed. For older students, you could have them pretend to act out some kind of activity in slow motion, or make circles with different parts of their bodies, or write their name in cursive in the air. All of these different images would encourage students to move in that continuous, smooth, uninterrupted manner. Moving with flow is an important readiness in guiding students out of rhythm babble. An important readiness for guiding students out of tonal babble is emphasis on the resting tone. Because audiation of the resting tone is essential to our sense of tonal context, we need to find ways to expose our students to the resting tone and encourage audiation of the resting tone as early and often as possible. One of the simplest ways to do this is by singing directions on the resting tone. So if I were singing a song in major tonality, I might sing my directions like this. Maybe once in a while I would jump up to the dominant, and then I would come back down. Singing directions on the resting tone maintains the tonal context in between repetitions of a song, and it also maximizes time spent making and learning music. So instead of speaking your directions, you can sing them on the resting tone in the context of whatever song you happen to be using with your students. Another way of encouraging audiation of the resting tone is through what I call the 5-1 tag. That's how I refer to it in my mind. This is something a lot of MLT teachers use, where at the end of a song, for example, if we were singing a song in major tonality, at the end of the song we would sing yum-ba-da-dum-bum, bum. Or some teachers I know sing ah, bum. And you would raise your hand up in the air on ah, and then lower them on bum. Or you would raise them on yum-ba-da-da-bum, bum. You would lower them on that resting tone. So you could introduce this 5-1 tag by singing it after the ends of the songs you're using in class, and then once students are familiar with that 5-1 tag, you can elongate that last dominant pitch or add a short pause before breathing and singing the resting tone. So you could go yum-ba-da-dum-bum, bum. And eventually, students will begin jumping in with the resting tone after you sing the dominant pitch. My students even started singing the whole 5-1 tag at the ends of the songs we would use in class. Other ideas for reinforcing the resting tone include playing a tonic tremolo or an ostinato on a tone bar instrument, or playing a move and freeze game where students move with flow while you sing phrases of a song, and then freeze when you pause between phrases to play the resting tone on a tone bar. You could also do playful things like blowing bubbles and then modeling singing the resting tone as you pop each bubble. Or you could move a beanbag on a part of your body with flow and then drop it and sing the resting tone. Another easy idea is to add sound effects on the resting tone. For example, if you were doing the activity I mentioned earlier in which you pretend to make soup to encourage that continuous fluid movement while stirring, when you toss in each ingredient, if you were singing a song in major tonality, for example, when you toss in the ingredient, you could do something like, let's toss in 3 potatoes into our soup, bloop, 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 and you could sing it on that resting tone. Or you could do, and drop, as you drop the thing into the soup. Providing experiences that reinforce the resting tone will help students begin to develop tonal audiation before you even ask them to sing the resting tone. However, in order to learn to sing in tune, students also need to find and learn to use their singing voices. Voice exploration can be an effective way to help students discover their singing voice by encouraging them to explore all the different sounds their voice can make. To elicit vocal exploration, you could use any imagery or activity that prompts students to explore the range of high to low sounds their voices can produce. You could have students pretend to make a train whistle sound, woo woo, to hoot like an owl, hoo hoo, or to sound like a police siren, woo. You could also add sound effects to an activity, make animal sounds, or use silly voices. Anything to get students exploring the different timbres their voice can make and the range of high and low sounds it can produce, in the hopes that it will help them discover that singing voice feeling. In addition to voice exploration, students can be encouraged to begin using their singing voices in small and simple ways. An effective means for doing this is through tonal pattern play. In tonal pattern play, the teacher models singing tonal patterns in the context of a song or activity and encourages students to respond, but doesn't require a response or expect correctness. There are lots of fun and engaging ways to do pattern play, like singing a tonal pattern as you drop or toss and catch a beanbag, or pretend to take a breath and jump into a puddle, singing a pattern when you land. For older students, you might pretend to shoot a basketball and sing a tonal pattern, encouraging them to do the same as they echo your pattern. If you need a refresher on how to construct tonal patterns, back in episode 8, I talked about the basics of pattern instruction. So that was in terms of more formal instruction, but it will give you a quick reminder on how those tonal patterns are put together. So you could use them in tonal pattern play with informal music guidance. Now, when we're talking about tonal pattern play as a part of informal music guidance, it's important to remember that students should not be forced to perform in particular ways. The teacher should model singing tonal patterns and encourage students to respond, but not demand it or expect correct singing. Just continue to provide experiences with echoing tonal patterns and playing with tonal patterns, and students will engage as they become more comfortable and developmentally ready. So, reinforcing resting tone, doing vocal exploration, and informal tonal pattern play are all important parts of helping students move through tonal babble. For helping students move through rhythm babble, we can start with flow, and then we can begin transitioning to the beat. This can begin with adding beat pulsations to the continuous fluid movement. For example, if you were doing the painting activity I mentioned previously, where you're pretending to paint the room in a very smooth way with continuous fluid movement, you could pretend that you're painting polka dots all around the room. So your hands and your arms are still moving continuously, and now you're adding pulses with your fingers to the beat. If you were moving beanbags with flow, you could pretend to give them a bumpy ride around you instead of a smooth ride and bounce them to the beat. Another way to help students feel beat is through cooperative movement, in which a student is able to feel the beat by moving with another student or group of students. This could include students pretending to row back and forth to the beat in partners, to bounce a hula hoop to the beat in a small group, or to make a train by forming a line with hands on shoulders and swaying and stepping to the beat together. When doing these kinds of activities, you can purposefully pair students who are beat competent with students who are still struggling to feel the beat, so that those students who are beat competent can help the other students feel that steady beat. You could strategically place students who are beat competent near students who are learning to feel the beat, and in doing so, you can provide those students with opportunities to feel the beat without being singled out as wrong. In addition to flow with beat pulsations, and moving to the beat, rhythm pattern play can help students move through rhythm babble. Similar to tonal pattern play, in rhythm pattern play, the teacher models chanting rhythm patterns in the context of a song or chant and encourages students to respond. For example, if students were pretending to paint the room during a song, after the song you could pretend to flick each paint color off your hands and chant a few rhythm patterns as you flick to the beat, encouraging students to echo and flick the paint off their hands. This gets at an important piece of exiting music babble, and that is coordinating breathing and moving with singing and chanting. According to Gordon, the final stage of preparatory audiation, called coordination, is especially important because, quote, it is then children actually learn how, on a conscious level, to coordinate with some precision their singing and chanting of tonal patterns and rhythm patterns with breathing and body movements. Thus, they become acutely aware of anacrusis, metacrusis, and crusis as they perform tonal patterns and rhythm patterns in familiar tonalities, keyalities, meters, and tempos, which is what assists them in moving out of preparatory audiation into audiation. That abridged quote is from page 37 of Gordon's 2013 edition of Music Learning Theory for Newborn and Young Children. I'll link to that in the show notes. So to help students begin developing this coordination between their breathing and their moving and their singing and their chanting, we can help them coordinate, for example, swinging their arms, inhaling, jumping, and landing as they sing or chant. One great example of this is the chant Jump Over the Ocean, which is in the first music play. It goes like this. Jump over the ocean, jump over the sea, jump where you want to, but not on me. So as you begin each phrase, you could model swinging your arms and taking a deep breath as you jump into the air and land as you chant the word jump. Jump. You could do a similar activity where you pretend to jump into a pile of leaves or a puddle and sing or chant a tonal pattern or rhythm pattern as you land. This action of jumping helps coordinate that inhalation and then the performance of the tonal pattern or rhythm pattern. So all of these ideas for engaging students in informal music guidance are so important before beginning formal instruction so that students have the readiness to be successful. These informal music guidance experiences will help them transition from preparatory audiation into audiation so that they're ready to be successful with the skills that they'll be learning at the oral level of the skill learning sequence. If we just jump right into formal instruction with the skill learning sequence, our students will likely hit a wall at some point. If we instead invest first in providing them with rich and extensive informal guidance in music, this will pay dividends later on. When I was teaching K-5 general music, I basically spent all of kindergarten on informal guidance, and then the students were ready to rock and roll once we started learning sequence activities at the oral level in first grade. And don't forget that informal guidance should never stop. Before older students begin formal instruction with more advanced content, we need to make sure to provide them opportunities to experience that content through informal guidance first. So if you're going to be teaching a tonality like Mixolydian or Dorian at the oral level, first you need to be sure you've provided students with opportunities to be exposed to that tonality and to explore and play around in that tonality through informal guidance first. Similarly, as you add in more advanced functions, like subdominant and major and minor, you need to provide informal guidance experiences to acculturate your students to those functions before starting to teach them through the skill learning sequence. Well, I know we're just scratching the surface on these ideas, so in the next episode, again, I'll be having my first guest, one of the co-authors of Music Play and Music Play 2, who will talk to us more about preparatory audiation and informal guidance. You won't want to miss it. Also, remember that in the next episode, I'll be announcing the winners of both Music Play and Music Play 2, so make sure you enter by next Tuesday, November 3rd if you'd like to win. And remember to vote. In the meantime, if you have questions, comments, or suggestions for future episodes, please get in touch. You can email me or send me a voice memo at everydaymusicality@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. Thanks for listening, and let's keep musicking every day. And don't forget to vote.
I'm kicking out the old regime. Liberation, elevation, education. America, you a lie, but the whole world about to testify. I said the whole